Good morning, everyone. This is the March version of the Treasure Valley Data Enthusiasts. Welcome to a sunny Thursday in Boise, Idaho. Today we have with us Jed Summerton. Jed and I know each other from days with the Eckerson Group, and now as an independent consultant and teacher and advisor, Jed is willing and able today to share with us some of his experiences with telling your stories with data. And without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Jed if you want to just share your screen now.
Sure, I'll talk for 30 seconds before I actually put my first slide up, if that's all right, Mike. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you folks today. And as Mike said, I'm based in Denver, where it's not sunny today. I don't know where you guys get the sunshine. We didn't, but my topic is data storytelling, which I consider to be the art and the science of getting people to believe in and adopt your analytic insights so that they can make measurable improvements, whether that's in business, whether it's in government, public service, whatever it is. And I'll begin by telling you an actual data story. Right? And I'll break it down and hopefully give you some ideas that you can find helpful. But please keep in mind that this 1 hour or 45 to 50 minutes is condensed from an 8-hour data story workshop that I give to my commercial clients. So I may have to move quickly in some spots, but I'll try to keep a few minutes at the end for questions. In my data story today, I'll ask you to take the role of the actual audience, the elected county commissioners of Eagle County, Colorado, which is the home of the town of Vail. So without further ado, let me just jump right into it. Be able to share my screen. And we'll go over to what will be a blue screen first, and then I'll put my PowerPoint in presentation mode and should be able to see my first slide.
I see it, Jed. Thank you.
So here we are in the Eagle County Commissioners meeting room. Good evening, Commissioners. I am Jed Summerton. I live in Denver, but I'm very fond of Eagle County, Colorado, and I appreciate the opportunity to present to you tonight about a recent traffic fatality and about which I may have some ideas for your consideration. I'll start by recalling an article recently in the Summit Daily News, Summit County Daily News, from Eagle Vail, and I'll read it aloud for those who are in the room, joining the meeting virtually and attending by audio only. A woman was killed and another was seriously injured in a head-on collision on I-70, just west of Vail. Witnesses said a Ford Ranger pickup truck was traveling east when it left the left side of the interstate, became airborne, and struck a Toyota Camry that was going west in the opposite lane. The woman driving the Camry was pronounced dead at the accident, and the woman driving the Ranger was taken to Vail Valley Medical Center. Police, at the time of this article, have not released the women's identities, but I can share one of them with you, the daughter of a dear friend of mine, and I can tell you right up front that I miss Mel. Now, I'm not here to ask you to bring her back, or I can't bring her back. I'm a data guy. So I want to do a little research and see how does the data line up with traffic fatalities and other factors that you have to have on your plate as commissioners, and compare that data from Eagle County to the state of Colorado as a whole. And compared to all of Colorado, Eagle County is doing quite well, much to your credit. You're more healthy, more wealthy, more educated, and have less crime. Also, Eagle County has 7 times the average tourist revenue of the rest of Colorado, more severe weather, almost 2.5 times the number of liquor licenses per person, a lower DUI arrest rate, and 6.7 times the DUI death rate compared to the rest of Colorado. Matter of fact, we're the second highest DUI death rate in Colorado. And I know that that is just one of the many things that you need to think about and take action about as you do this. I took my 13 facts and broke them down into some of the areas that I'm guessing that you think. You think about health, you think about demographics, you count the wealth and the environment and so forth. And you have a lot of things going on. And your duties are broad and deep, and they cut across all aspects of public policy. And they are all interconnected, as I'm sure you appreciate. For example, the unemployment rate goes up, it tends to reduce the poverty rate. If the employment rate goes up, it tends to increase household income. But if the poverty rate goes up, it tends to increase the crime rate. So all of these factors are interrelated. And there's a couple others I'd like to bring to your particular attention today. When snowfall increases, tourism tends to go up, at least from outside of Eagle County. And tourism tends to increase the number of liquor licenses that are in demand within the county. However, there are some connections that are not necessarily working in our favor. The number of increases in liquor licenses can increase the number of DUI deaths in the county. And that's just straight logic, and there are a lot of statistics to bear that out. What I'm asking you today is to consider, how can we disrupt that cycle? Can we make more DUI arrests and actually decrease the DUI deaths? And I would say, if we can do that and better align with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, we will be able to have a big benefit on the health and safety and indeed the lives of your residents. In fact, police patrols, with or without arrests, the data show that police patrols tend to decrease DUI infractions just by the fact that patrols are out there on the street, whether or not they arrest people. That sounds a little fishy, so let's dig into that a little bit more. Our neighbor to the north, Wyoming, did a study of the impact on police patrols on traffic fatality in Wyoming and in surrounding states in the last 8 years. First of all, a little bit of idea, the miles driven, most in Colorado, Wyoming, Montana second, Wyoming third. But Colorado has the most miles. So my inference there is the impacts that we see from Wyoming would be even more pronounced in Colorado, including Eagle County. What are the factors that tended to reduce DUI deaths? If you increase the budget of the police over 8 years, it tend to decrease the amount of DUI deaths. The number of sworn officers that are available for patrolling also tend to, as they increase, also tend to decrease the DUI deaths. But the mere fact of field visibility, the fact that the police are out on patrol, had the highest correlation of any of these factors to actually reducing DUI fatalities. Police visibility, just visibility alone, has the greatest effect. Now, if I were in your chairs, and I don't know that I have the courage to be an elected commissioner, but if I were in your chairs, I'd be saying, wait a minute, we don't have the money to increase our budget. We don't have the money to increase our patrol officers. And we can't have people just sitting outside on the roads being visible to make a difference. I would say that I believe, and I would propose to you, that the challenges are solvable. First of all, exploit the DUI, the situation, just the funding of a DUI. A traffic stop consumes about 6 hours of your police time at about $80 an hour, $480. The DUI fines in Colorado, $600 to $1,500. So with that increase, you have to seed fund in advance, but then it becomes self-sustaining over time. I would propose that you should increase the road safety and use that funding to increase road safety to the level of your other unique attributes, why people come to Vail. A great brand. Eagle County ranks very high globally, and visitors assume that its roads and its area is safe. You've covered the crime rate. You need to focus on the roads. The snowfall, great. White gold, love it. Crime rate, really good. Half of the rest of Colorado. But the roads, can we do something there? And I believe the answer is yes. The traffic on I-70, 100 to 2,000 cars per hour. On the secondary and tertiary roads, a lot less, but it's a logical assumption, at least from my view of human nature, that if people see a lot of cops on I-70, they're going to assume that they're in other places as well. And everybody knows, when you see a cop car, you tend to behave better. So I would encourage you to look carefully to see if we can increase that visibility. I recognize that you've got a lot on your plate, a lot of people coming to you and asking you to do what they would like you to do. And you can't do it all. I get it. But saving those lives, I think, is the #1 priority. Police field visibility correlates very strongly to reducing the traffic deaths. And, as I showed on previous slides, I believe the resources are available. And statistically, it's reasonable to expect that doubling the visibility of enforcement will cut your traffic fatalities in half. So my request to you is to act now and save lives. That was the end of the original data story. I'd like to give you an update now. In 2005, the DUI arrest rate was 3.2 per thousand. In 2006, not directly because of this data story, but because of a lot of other things, Eagle County formed a task force and got the cities together to enforce DUI more aggressively. In 2017, their arrest rate was 7.6, more than double, reducing its DUI deaths by 50%. The point of this last slide is the data of the results bear out the hypotheses early on and make it for, I think, a pretty compelling data story. The question is, my next question is, okay, how did I build this data story? It seems pretty straightforward, although sometimes some of you may have some challenges in doing it for the first time, or if you have done it a couple times, maybe I have some pointers that might help you do it a little bit better next time. So let's just start into that, what I call the data story workshop. Many of you may know about a man named Stephen Few, who's done a lot of research in how the human mind and eyes react and process visualizations. And he is the man who's written Show Me the Numbers, several books, but he's also the creative genius, the visual genius behind Tableau, and they are named for the visualizations. So he's always said, numbers have an important story to tell, give them voice, right? My version of that is data requires story, and stories require data. If you don't have one, then you don't have much leg to stand on. So some of my little credentials here, we don't need to spend any time there. Topics I'd like to go through today. What's the foundation for data stories? Context, content, and then audience and delivery. And because, as I mentioned earlier, I've condensed this down from about 150 slides to about 30, I'm going to focus on where I have found in my experience that data storytellers typically need the most help. So let's start out with our data story goals for today. A data story, what is it? It's a compelling narrative supported by data and leading to actions. Duh. But my goal is to provide guidance and perhaps inspiration for you to enhance your skills. My approach, I'll show it. I think I just did that, hopefully. I'm going to break it down for you. I'm going to then build it up, focusing on the most common challenges, and then prepare you to dare greatly. And I say that because when you are presenting a data story, you're putting your whole self out there right on the field. You're not in the stands, you're not in the cheap seats, you're in the arena, and you've got to deliver. And either go big or go home is my philosophy on this. So data story is about engaging with your audience to make an impact, to get them to want to support you and your idea, and engage them with skin in the game so that they can help you take it forward. So enough of the background. Let's talk about the arc of a data story. I'm going to start out with an arc. Problem, going from a problem or an opportunity, two sides of the same coin, to an impact, which is either return on investment or, if you're a nonprofit or government, return on mission, delivering in a better way, better goods in a better way. How do we get there? First, you need to have facts, and sometimes with a little hint of what the solution might be. Then, how do you interpret those facts? What do they mean to you? Then, extending that interpretation to implication. What does it mean to everyone else? And then what action should we take as a result? Now, I sometimes describe this as the what sequence. What is going on? So what does it mean to us? Then what could happen? And then now what do we do about it? So if we take this insight and say, how I interpret it, that means we could go after an increased market share or a new market. Then what? Our revenue will increase. Now what? Here's how we go about it, right? And that is bookended by the why. Why are we here? Why do we care, right? And why you should care as members of my audience and act on my request. Hopefully that sounds fairly straightforward. The question is, how do we do it? We don't do it by delivering a dry presentation or recitation of facts. We want to make it compelling. And I believe the ancient Greeks had it right. Start with ethos. What is your credibility? Why are you really the best one to speak on this topic? Logos. What's your logic? There's where your facts and your data come in. And then pathos, the passion of which you deliver it, the pacing, the eye contact, the body language, the things that get the audience, sometimes the pauses, to let them think and let it sink in, can be part of the passion that you grab them and get them to be not only intellectually involved, but emotionally involved. So what does it look like? Well, I believe that any data story, if you just walk in and say, here's what I've been thinking about for the last 2 months, boom, boom, boom. If you're going into an audience of senior executives, they probably have 15 meetings, maybe more in a given day. They're constantly context switching. They aren't grounded necessarily in what you're about to talk about. So we need to provide a business context. Then I'll get into the content and then how to handle audiences and delivery. But let's remember, before we start anything, we need to think about the cast of the data story. Yes, it's you, and yes, it's the audience, but it's also the other key stakeholders that may be affected by your proposal. And they might not be in the room, but I can pretty much guarantee that the audience is thinking about, well, this works for me, but what about Mary over there? And what about Tom down the hall? What's he going to do? Is he going to be on board? So we need to think about the enterprise context, and then we relate that down to the audience. And your data story is at the intersection of all three aspects of that Venn diagram. But the context and how you present it colors everything. The context of a DUI deck affects everyone. It's universal. It doesn't really need to be explained. But in your case, it might. Hey guys, let's go fishing. Well, the context is, maybe we need to take some precautions. Another context, it looks like a mugging going on here. And this is important. Looking at a problem from another angle might relieve and give you an entirely different view of the situation. He's not hurting her, he's helping her. So that context is absolutely critical. And if you don't address it in your piece, the others will think about it anyway, and they'll start generating in their minds some objections, some concerns that they may or may not be able to speak out loud. But once that little inkling of doubt starts, in my experience, it builds and it becomes worse over time. And then pretty soon, people they're either disengaging, like this is not going to work, forget it, or they're thinking, I'm going to do my best to make sure this never happens. Neither of those things do you want to have happen. So setting the context and saying, here's what matters in the business. For example, you start with a business context is key performance indicators from a balanced scorecard. Now, this balanced scorecard goes back to Harvard Business Review, 1989, the first article, and then 92, and then 93. Well established, but it's amazing to me how many companies really don't have a balanced scorecard. What are your KPIs? We have 75. No, you can't have 75 KPIs. They can't all be key. If you have more than maybe a dozen, maybe a dozen and a half, it's too many gauges to watch. Yes, you can drill down, but you need to come up with really key performance indicators. British Airways, for example, very large international corporation, has one KPI. One. It's called late planes. And if a plane is late, it affects customer sat, it affects, gate time, refueling time, aircraft maintenance, all kinds of things, catering, baggage handling, right? All that. Keep your eye on the ball and choose selectively which KPI you want to affect and tie it to what everybody cares about, that business context. So you might want to make a small change over here, but if you can relate it to that business context that's larger that everybody gets, they can see it as an improvement that is positive, and they're going to go after it. There's other things besides the balanced scorecard, right? There's mission, community, sustainability. A lot of times that's in a balanced scorecard, and culture. So that's the context. Let's talk about the content. Let's take a data story from the ARC to an actual business case. I'm going to start with the context and why. Why are we here, as I just mentioned? Then I'm going to go through the facts, the what, your interpretation of the facts, the so what, the implication of those facts, where you want the audience to go, and then the action that you're requesting, and now what. And let's look at how that might take place over time. I'm going to relate this back to my data story. The context and why I'm here were pages 1 and 2. That is the cover sheet that I want to talk about reducing fatalities, and the article from the Summit Daily News. Then I went through the what, the various 13 facts that I pulled about data from Eagle County versus Colorado overall, and then the implications of how those things are related and how increases in liquor licenses can actually increase DUI deaths. And then I went through the then what? What can we do about it? We can disrupt the cycle. Here's some data that actually shows that that's possible. And here's some rationale of why we need to do that, page 10. And in that series, there's 2 different parts that are really important in the implication. It's good to have an aha moment. DUI deaths are a tragedy. The aha is, we can do something about it. I have an idea. Aha, we can change this. And then going through the logic that actually presents your data and mitigates some of their concerns and heads them off at the pass. And there you can then nip some of those objections in the bud. Now, people are going to be interrupting you while you do this. They're going to be saying, what about this? What about that? And if there are executives in the room, you're not going to be able to keep them quiet. But that is actually an opportunity to engage them in dialogue, to recognize, acknowledge the report, the points, and what would you do about it to counteract. And then you can get to the actual recommendations of action, what I'd like you to do, and a very clear, specific ask at the end that says, I'm not just asking you to say, okay, keep going. I'm asking you to put skin in the game, to act now and provide additional budget, assign additional resources, whatever it is will take to move your puck forward down the road. So let's get into the elements of the plot, of the content of the data story. Well, guess what? We start with data, right? Present all of the relevant facts, even the ones that might be contrary to your case, because you can use those to acknowledge the folks in the room who may be doubters that you get it. There's more going on than just this, and you're not going to sugarcoat it. And if you don't present those facts, they will, and it will undermine your momentum and whatever goodwill you build up with the audience. So bring it all out, bring it all on, and make sure you've got a good story for why your good facts are going to outweigh the bad facts. And of course, visuals. Use as many visuals as you possibly can, but keep them simple, and each with a very clear message. If you make them incredibly complex, the audience will struggle with trying to understand, what's that saying to me? And they won't be listening to what you're saying. Don't make it hard on them to figure out your point. I would rather have 3 simple visuals that progress, A, B, C, than to have one that has everything all at once and they can't figure out what in Sam Hill's going on, right? And the third element of the plot of a data story is, of course, your narrative. You want to make it succinct. You want to make it passionate. You don't want to read the slides, right? They can read the slides. You want to complement what's on the slides. So let's take a look at visuals. I assume a lot of you folks have experience wrangling data, so I'm not going to go into the details of, Excel and better tools, SQL and on up, right? But I have seen so many people make really bad, preventable errors in just visuals. And I'll show you, I want to just give you an idea of, and this is from Stephen Few, I've got him in Colin Ware. We've done a lot of research on how the mind works and how the eye works. And use those attributes, since they're a natural part of everybody, use those attributes to leverage your visual presentation. So let me ask you, this is what we call attentive processing. When I ask you a question, how many fives do you see? You're paying attention, you're trying to figure out how many are there. You could probably go through there and count them pretty quickly, but I bet you if I talk about pre-attentive processing and I use contrast, a visual property, contrast, you can count them a whole, pick them out and process them a whole lot faster. So my point is, don't confuse a lot of things. I have probably 30 slides I could show you of bad and better graphics. I'm just going to show you one that is, I call it my pet peeve, but I see it all the time and it confuses people a lot. A very simple histogram. Some people like to press that button in Excel and say, make it 3D. Ooh, great eye candy, right? Let me ask you, if you look across, is this box hitting the number 1 line, or is it just short of the number 1 line? And are we falling, if our targets are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, are we falling short on all of them? Or are we actually hitting the mark like the first chart tells you? My point is, don't do that. Don't do that. It confuses your audience, and really my question is, what's more important, eye candy or your message? Here's one from one of my clients that did this without me, and they fixed it. Here's the percentage of interviewees, but they did a survey. Here's the people we interviewed by department in the company. Look at this. First of all, I don't know how many interviews they did, right? And then I look at this and I'm thinking, it's entirely misleading because this customer service happens to be in the front. It looks larger than the other 3 pie slices counterclockwise that are actually higher in percentage. Don't do that. Instead, here's a Pareto histogram, right? Sorted in descending order, right? And I have n equals 100, and they can see which departments, and they get an idea of what the units actually are and percentages as well. So it's less eye candy, yeah, but it's more clarity and impact. So just keep those ideas of visualizations in mind as you prepare your data story. Just make the point. Executives like it clear, clean, concise, or what we sometimes say, be brief, be bright, be gone, right? Don't confuse them. So, elements of the plot, the narrative, making it succinct and passionate. How do you do that? Hey, I'm an engineer, right? I grew up with slide rule. No, I was a little after the slide rule thing, but not much. I'm an engineer. I want to tell everybody all the facts, and I just want to get it all out there. And the facts should speak for themselves, right? That's how I think. I'm an engineer. No, that's not how audiences react. If all you do is stick the facts out there, they're going to get bored. They're going to snooze. They're going to think about something else. They're going to go to their BlackBerry or their email or whatever it is from whatever era of executives you're talking about, right? So make it succinct and passionate. First of all, talk to the audience about why they should care. What's in it for me is what the audience is asking. Answer those questions. Put that in a format of the what, so what, then what, now what, so that you progress toward a logical conclusion and lead them to where you want them to go. And do it from their perspective, what they care about, not necessarily what you care about. Hopefully that's aligned, but it might not be. But that's okay, as long as you get your point across to them. And then ask yourself, particularly if you know the audience in advance, and in most corporate settings, you pretty much do, what does your proposal mean to each member of your audience and their teams or their colleagues that are on the meeting? What are the benefits, what are the costs, what are the risks? And then specifically, what changes are you proposing and why will they want to do that? I want you to increase visibility of the police on the road. Why would you want to do that? Save lives. Get people to behave better, not drive DUI, and save lives. And then ideally, you can also address some of the objections that you can anticipate. Joe's always going to ask about this. You're always going to be worried about money. Somebody else is always going to be worried about whatever it is, right? Think about that in advance and how you would respond. And then make it compelling. We're not just talking about DUI, we're talking about injury and worse. We're not just talking about a handheld computer. We're talking about an iPhone, a phone and music player and a browser in your pocket. Introduced 13, 15 years ago, right? Steve Jobs didn't just talk about handheld computer. He talked about what it meant for those people. What's an app for updating friends and family? Well, it is shared lives and community. And TV, it's not just staring at the tune, it's programming that you love. And specifically for Eagle County, not just snow sports, but experience of a lifetime. So we can take any of these types of mundane facts and turn them into meaning that are so much more compelling than facts alone. Emotional connection carries the day. So how do we make that? Let's go talk about the audience and your delivery. I didn't have the foresight to ask Mike if he could put up a poll during this presentation, but I'm wondering how many of you feel very comfortable going to an audience of chief executives, taking 20 minutes of their time and asking for $5 million or whatever a reasonable amount is within your business, right? Some people got it down, and if you're among them, maybe you can give me some pointers. But I always feel a little bit of butterflies, right? So let's talk about audience, the key stakeholders, and you. But guess what? It's not about you. It's about the audience and their key stakeholders. Know them. Think like they do as best you can. Prepare for them. What questions are they going to, what are they going to want to know? What do they care about? And then deliver for them. Now, there's lots of different ways to actually assess audiences, and there's the Myers-Briggs of personality preferences, and there's some that that's usually done on an individual scale. There are some other enterprise level tools. One's called Discovery Insights. One of them is called Enneagrams. There's several of them out there. But Discovery Insights asks you to take questions and devise and just preferences and how you think and how you operate within a business setting. And I teach at the University of Denver in the master's programs in the College of Business. And we use Discovery Insights because it breaks people down into 4 broad areas. The upper right quadrant is red, the upper left is blue, lower left green, lower right yellow. And it trains people about knowing where you are on this wheel, and then how to work with others and meet them where they are in a way that they want to be communicated to. So it's not just about what you want to say, it's about the audience, really, and you must adapt to them. If I take that Discovery Insights and break it down to its main quadrants, it looks like this. And a blue person, these are the engineers, give me the details. If they are engineers and you just present a broad context, they're going to say, yeah, you'll never get it off the ground, because here's why. So presenting to them, you want to be well prepared, thorough, and everything. Put it in writing. Right? Give it to me so I can. Don't be flippant. Don't be at a high level, and don't, call me without an agenda. Let us know what you're talking about. If, as more than 75% of executives in Fortune 500 companies fall into the executive quadrant, the red quadrant, like I said, be brief, be bright, be gone, right? Be direct, to the point. Don't dilly-dally. Don't try to, take over their meeting. Don't say it can't be done, because they're executives there to make it happen, right? Yellow, you want to involve me, and then green, show me you care. Lots of different personality types out there, and of course they're not just these four. There's all the different. No, it's on a spectrum, right? And some people have what I call split personalities, or I'm schizophrenic, and so am I, where they're part red, part blue, and you have to give them the high level concept and the details, and probably do it in that order. Right? So that takes us to the point of trying to think like them. Your context from the previous slide. What is the scope of their responsibilities? What else affects their interests? What do they care about? How are they likely to think and engage? Are they going to be focused? Are they going to be favorable? Are they going to be friendly? And what questions are they going to ask? Well, your key points are going to be the first level, obvious ones. The second level, you're going to be prepared because you've thought about this in advance, and you're going to have an answer. You'll probably be able to anticipate a lot of the questions, but you can't put them all on the slide. You don't have enough room. So you just want to think about those in advance and have those answers in your hip pocket, or maybe a backup slide in the appendix of your deck. And then the third level, stuff that comes out of the blue you can't anticipate, it's going to happen. You're just going to have to address them on the fly. So let's talk about putting together that deck, of how you pull all that together with all those visuals. And here are what I call the 10 commandments of a data story slide deck. No more than 20 slides, no more than 20 minutes, no more than 3 bullets per slide, unless you're presenting 10 commandments. Talk with the audience. Not too many graphics on a slide, right? You can read the rest of this. Don't read your slides like I was just doing, right? Rehearse, check the venue, and all those things, right? And this I give one of my clients, Susan Keith, and not mine, these are her commandments, so I want to give her credit for that. But speaking of 10 commandments, I'd like to ask you just an off-the-wall question. Who was the first person who downloaded from the cloud onto a tablet? Some of these ideas have been around for centuries, right? So no more than 20 slides. What's that look like? Title page, background, various components here, right? We can click through them all, right? So that's the ideal recommended 10 slides. The maximum, I think, is 20 slides per the previous 10 commandments. What I did in my actual presentation to Eagle County, I had 12. And that's how they map up with that formula, which, by the way, maps up with the arc of the data story and all the principles. So all this stuff hangs together, if you will. So let me ask you, when you're going into a room, do you feel that you have to command it, or you feel like you're just there to go through the flow? And the answer is, obviously, if you're giving a presentation, you need to command the room. Do you feel comfortable doing that? And by the way, once you get started, it's usually okay, but how do you get started, right? There's a formula that I subscribe to: a polite salutation, hello, introduction, a relevant personal fact, and then set some expectations. And here's my favorite example of getting started. If you've seen the movie The Princess Bride, hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father. Prepare to die. Now, obviously, you don't want to, prepare your audience to die. But getting it started without a lot of rambling and being very succinct is key, because it sets the tone for the rest of the meeting. I encourage you to do that. Practice it. Write it down in front of you. Read it till you've got it memorized. Really important, because it gets you started on the right foot and can get rid of some of the butterflies that you might be thinking or feeling at the time. So to command the room, I recommend that you want to be relevant, visionary, set it out there. You're usually, when you're making a presentation, you're not just updating somebody on project status. You're asking them for something. You want to paint a vision of a very much better tomorrow, and paint that vision very clearly. Be committed to your topic, be authentic, debrief. So what's it take to do that? Sounds great, right? What's it take to do that? These are what I consider to be some keys, and I give credit to WIT Communications for this because they have there's a reference for you. Unafraid, be up there, be bold, right? Be yourself. If you're not good at jokes, keep them to a minimum. If you're good at jokes, don't maximize them because that'll detract from your presentation. Use humor appropriately. Use silence appropriately. Let people think a minute. Let it sink in. So that they really can move along with you. If you move too fast and you didn't let it sink in, they're not going to be there with you at the end. And you need them to be. So, focus on them. Keep your material in hand. Not focus on your material, keep them in hand. Focus on them. Be fully present. Breathe. Helps. Go down to eye contact. Eye contact is important. If you're in a big auditorium and there's 1,000 people, you can't have eye contact. If you're in a meeting room and there's 5 people, you can look at each one for a second or two to make sure that they're connecting with you and that they got it. And then you can look at someone else on your next point, and you address each of them. Maybe you don't go around the room in the same order all the time, but you look at different points and you connect with them. And when you're looking at them, they got to connect with you. They can't be looking down. No, unless they're really rude. But eye contact really improves bonding. And it does another thing. It tells them that you have a compelling enough proposal that you can look them in the eye. And it's not something you're embarrassed about or concerned about, or no, you're a stand-up person, you're looking them dead in the eye, and you're holding their gaze, they know you're serious. And that's very impactful in a lot of ways. But let me ask you, what does it take to be able to do that? Right? Well, you've got your data story, right? And hopefully you build up enough confidence to present it because you have conviction about the subject matter, because you've done your preparation and you've done your research and you are situationally aware of what's going on in the business, that this matters. That what you're asking them to do is important, that it's going to make a difference. And you've got all of that acting in your favor. If you just did this on a fly because you thought about it this morning, you're presenting it at lunch, well, here's a hint. I didn't just think about this morning and presenting it at lunch. I believe data storage is important. So hopefully you can see that and it comes across in my delivery. Then I can go about that delivery and lead to success and celebrate making an impact. And you're thinking, hey, Jed, sounds great. I've never presented to executives. I'm guessing most of the people here have, but I don't have that confidence thing that's underlying my data story, right? Well, here's the thing. I believe that confidence is a decision on your part, not a feeling. It's a decision on your part that what you're proposing is more important than your fear. And if you can say, this is game-changing to the business, I can do this, right? Because it's so important that I can rise to the occasion. So the day of, well prepared and well rehearsed. Rehearsal is key. Just to figure out the phrasing of the words that you want to use, if nothing else. So dress like a leader. I call that 25% better in the audience. You're not going to go in a full suit and tie if you're in a development shop and it's everybody in t-shirt and jeans, right? But you're going to have a sports shirt and maybe nice jeans, or maybe even slacks, right? A little bit better in your audience, because this is important. And you want to convey that with your physical presence, that you respect them and they should respect you and your subject matter. This is different. It's not an everyday thing, and therefore I'm dressing for success. Practice your ritual. If you tend to get nervous, maybe you do some yoga to calm down or some meditation, or maybe you do the warrior pose like Ali here. And by the way, a funny little story here. That warrior pose, proven by psychologists. There's data on this stuff, folks. It's unbelievable. If you do this pose for 2 minutes, straight posture, standing up before a presentation, your performance and your confidence will improve. Now, do it in the washroom if you want, right? Or maybe do it, in your office before you go upstairs to the corner office. But it's silly, sounds silly, but it actually works. Hey, and in my perspective, if something's going to improve your performance, I'm in, right? I'll try it. And yeah, I've tried it, and yeah, it seems to help. So maybe give it a shot. And then show up and set up early. Make sure the stuff works. Mike and I got online yesterday, make sure I could share my screen and go through all, the cameras working, the mics working, all that kind of stuff. I didn't want to, have some fumbling. As we saw in the Golden Globes Award, where, an acceptance speech starts with a technical difficulty, man, that just doesn't go over well, right? So do that, take that time, be prepared. And then it's 1, 2, 3, go, you're on, right? And you deliver. So to summarize, align with the business and the context that's important and relevant, not only to the individual stakeholders in the room, but the key stakeholders outside the room and the larger business as a whole, right? Use your brand, your ethos, why you're credible to speak in this room, know your stuff and care, that arc of the data story. Use a lot of visuals, not more than 3 per slide because it gets a little exhausting. I had 4 on my slide, one was background, and then 3 different quotes. So that's pushing the limit there, but they were all the same kind of graphic. They weren't a little photograph here and an icon there and a data display someplace else. Keeping that consistency of type of graphic on a given slide is important. It just reduces the dissonance or the shape shifting that the people have to do to shift from an icon to a picture to it and try to figure out how's all that stuff fit together. If it's all the same kind of thing, it's easier for them to connect the dots and easier for them to stay with you and easier for them to buy in to what you're talking about. And then meet the audience where they are, how they like to engage. Don't talk at them, talk with them, ideally. Now this forum right now is a one-way because webinars aren't interactive. But when I actually went to the Eagle County, well, they're used to presentation. You got 15 minutes and they'll cut you off if you're not done. I was at 13 minutes. And they're not there asking, they'll ask questions at the end. But most business meetings allow or have space for time in the middle for other people to interrupt, take questions, etc. Don't get up such a head of steam that they feel like they can't interrupt. If you pause a little bit, they'll ask questions. They'll use that empty space, that silence, to raise a question. And then you've got them engaged. It's two-way now. It's not just one way. So make sure you get that conversation going as early as possible. And then ask for their commitment to action. That, hey, put some skin in it, right? And then ultimately practice. Practice, practice, practice. Best way to Carnegie Hall, best way to the corner office, right? If you over-practice, I doubt you're going to get dull and boring in the meeting. I doubt you're going to fumble, right? You're able to actually go there and deliver the way you had envisioned it, as opposed to maybe potentially your worst nightmare or somewhere short of the bar that you had set for yourself and that they set for you. So that's in a pretty brief nutshell, and leaving a little bit of time at the end for questions. But before signing off, I'd like you to take a look at this slide. This is a quote from Teddy Roosevelt, president in the early part of the 20th century. And he's the one who came up with the phrase, daring greatly. It's not the people in the cheap seats that matter. It's the person on the field, the one in the arena, moving the ball or the puck forward. Sometimes it's not pretty, but you know what? If you don't put it out there, it ain't going to happen. And even if you stumble a little bit, you're still going to get points for trying. And they might come back and say, I like what you're talking about today, I hadn't thought about it that way before. I have a couple of questions for you. Can you come back in a week with some more answers? And you walk out of the room, and some people might say, well, dang, I didn't hit the bar. And other people might say, yes, I got them engaged. They like my idea, at least enough to spend some more time on it. It is another opportunity to come back to them and say, hey, I've got a new data story, and my story requires data, and I've got it. So that's my pitch to you folks today about what I consider to be a data story. There's lots of versions out there, and I'll take any feedback or any questions that you might have. Thanks.
Thanks, Jed. Appreciate that. Your confidence shines through. And we did have a question about your background. So why don't we start with that? We didn't do that at the beginning, afraid of running out of time, but maybe just a short little introduction to yourself and what you're doing these days.
Yeah, well, my background is, my degrees are in finance and computer science. So I've actually been putting data and business together for a long time. And I've been focusing on data for the last, since early 90s, data exclusively. And most of that's in healthcare and communications. I spent my career, about half of it, in as a consultant, and half of it as an internal business leader, so up to the level of VP in a Fortune 200 company. And those are complementary perspectives. Consultants kind of come in and they don't know much, and they ask a lot of really basic, sometimes called stupid questions, that they're really always revealing in some way or another if they're well formed. And also an appreciation for what it's like to be on the inside and in the decision hot seat, so to speak, so that I don't just throw out ideas, but I have an understanding how politics works and how organizations actually work. So I put those two together. And my business consultancy, as I said earlier now, is focused on not just building analytic platforms. There's a lot of people who do that and do it very well and better than I, but more on what should we measure. So what is the balanced scorecard? What should our KPIs be in this business? And then how do we measure that? And then once we have the answer, what do we do with that answer? I'm getting people to adopt the data-driven insights into their daily business practices, which requires them to change. And then you get into change management or change stewardship, as I call it, and get them to actually do things differently to be able to improve and measure their business performance. So as a consultant, I'm an advisor, a strategic planner. I do a lot of data strategy work. I do a lot of change management work. And data story is the bridge between coming up with the analytic and getting the adoption and the buy-in that you need for people to actually make those changes. Oh, and by the way, I also teach in the master's level at the University of Denver, Daniels College of Business, Department of Business Information and Analytics. And I chair the advisory board to that department as well. So try to keep my academic credentials going as well.
Thank you. And thanks for sharing those with us. I know you've helped me make some of my presentations better. It's always good to have someone that we can bounce them off of. You said practice. So oftentimes it's great to practice with someone that has a different viewpoint than yours,
Yeah.
who can bring up things that make. So you've helped me in that regard.
Go ahead.
One, I guess, comment. So we're a virtual presentation. We meet virtually now, and we were forced into that through COVID, but I think it's kind of the new reality. The benefit is that we get people from all over the United States, at least. We've had one international person join, but Veronica in our chat here, that confidence is a decision, that your proposal is more important than our fear. She says those are words to live by. So that's just a comment there. Veronica comes from us from the East Coast. Or near the coast, excuse me. I have a question about that virtual perspective. Now that it's less likely that we are presenting in front of a live audience now these days, how does that change your approach, given that you're presenting online more often?
It makes it more difficult in some ways because you can't see your audience necessarily in the body language of how they're reacting, right? And that's really key to your success. But the biggest tip that I would give to anybody, I don't know if my camera's on right now, But throughout the presentation, even though you're looking at slides, I did my best to look at the camera, not at the screen. And when you're looking at the camera, people can at least get the idea that you're giving them eye contact. And that is probably the best you can do, unless there's a room monitor, and even if there is, you're so busy talking and looking at your slides, they're on 15 other slides or, on Zoom, and they're too small for you to really stare and make individual eye contact in any of them. So it makes it more difficult. So you just have to assume that it's going well and pause more frequently to check for feedback. And I like to use questions that, I just say, any questions? What are your thoughts on that? I don't like to use the phrase, if that makes sense, because that makes it sound like you're not sure what you're saying is making sense. And I don't like to make statements sound like a question, because then it sounds like you're not really sure it's a question. And just be much more attentive to the audio and the fact that you can't see the feedback, but use the pauses to try to get it.
Okay, thank you. Another question from the chat says, thank you, first of all, and what would Napoleon make of Stephen Few's illustration of the retreat from Moscow?
Oh, one of my favorite graphics. Napoleon's march to Russia, and it showed 6 major different things on one graph. It showed the path they took, how many soldiers he had, and how many he had at point along the way. So it's diminishing, and then what the weather was, and then where the battles were, and it shows all this information on one incredible graphic. Google it, Napoleon's March on Russia graphic, and it's incredibly impactful. It set a new standard for visualization at the time, 60, but way too complex for a business audience, just way too complex. So what I actually have some slides that I show, here's what March would be, and here's how you would build up to that. And you present one piece at a time, and then you could show the final thing and walk people through it. So if you have a very complicated thing, do it one reveal at a time, and you can get there.
Yeah, thanks. And by the way, for anyone who would like to interact with questions here, we've only got a second, but if you have one verbally, feel free to shout it out right now.
Or Michael, you can send out my email address, and people can connect with me on LinkedIn, whatever. I'm glad to follow up.
I'll see you on my reply when I send out the video link to everyone.
Cool. Thanks.
And, yeah, and so we're almost to the top of the hour here. Hey, maybe one more question. I had a heckler one time in the audience, somebody who just flat out didn't believe me that we had done what we were claiming to do. Any suggestions on how to deal with those?
Sure, and it's always hard, right? Because they throw you off balance, and that's what they want to do. First, acknowledge their concern, right? You can't try to minimize or dismiss it. Acknowledge it and say, that's not part of my presentation, but I'd be glad to meet with you offline, understand it better, and then work it in and see if it changes anything that I've got, right? Yeah. So you kind of shut them up. And
yeah, but you don't give them the option.
The point. Shut them up but not down.
Yep. Give them the option to engage. Similar question just came in. What if your message is off target or not being well received?
Yeah, very similar. And say, and that's where you want to, start early and with some of the pauses and say, folks, does this resonate with you? Right? Does my framing of the problem, not just this problem, but does my framing of this problem, resonate or align with your thinking? And they'll tell you right then and there, and then you'll say, all right, well, that presentation goes out the window. I can use a couple of slides, but what I really like to do is try to engage in that topic the way you see it, right? And just admit that going through your northwest vector is not going to meet their easterly lying concern, right? So, just an idea.
All right. Well, we are at the top of the hour, and I thank you, Jed, for that. I appreciate your insights. I did want to just offer that if anyone has the ability to present at a future one of these meetings, I would love to hear from you. Here's my email address, and we want to hear your stories of success or failure. Sometimes the failures are the most valuable because it helps the rest of us not to go down the same path as you have. So, you know, we've had everything from like Jed to talking about how we can be better presenters and how we can sell our data project to highly technical cloud data warehouse discussions or data vault. So anything is on the table. We need a topic for next month. So please let me know, and we look forward to seeing you in a month. Thank you again, Jed, and thank you all for joining.
Thanks a bunch.
Okay, recording is off.